Good morning, everybody, and happy Saturday. This is Jenny, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to make this design in Adobe Fresco. It is an app for an iPad or an Android device, a Surface. I've heard that you can use it on a PC with a Wacom or something like that, but I am not sure. But anyway, this is the design we're going to do, and let's get started. So we are in the home screen of Adobe Fresco, and I'm actually using Adobe Fresco and going to be drawing on this image so you guys can see, what everything is. So this is the home screen here, and you'll see you've got home screen, learn, discover, and then your work is going to be in cloud documents. Here's your deleted down here. These are the documents I've recently been working on. And this is where you'll start a new document. If you have Adobe Creative Cloud, this app does not cost you anything if you have one of the subscriptions. I believe the Photographer's Suite is $9.99 a month, and it comes with Photoshop, Lightroom, and then all of the apps that you can get from the app stores. But the nice thing about the paid version is you get all their brushes, and their brushes are absolutely amazing. So we're going to talk about the paid version, and you'll just have to try the free version to see what kind of functionality it has, because I'm not really sure. So let's move on. So again, this is what your screen would look like. If you go into the Learn tab here, you're going to see there's some videos, brushes, layers, selections, and masking. And I highly recommend, they're very short, they're less than 2 minutes each, and they're just going to kind of carry you through how to use each tool. Again, very short, and I highly recommend that you watch every single one before you get started. It will just show you kind of where things are. So let's actually dive in and see how to use the app. So you're going to go back to your home screen, and you're going to tap on current screen size or whatever size you want, and that is going to bring you to the new design workspace. You get into the workspace, let's just take a look at some of these tools. You've got your tool panel over here on the left. This is your brushes right here, and I've got this blue, I've got it turned on to use this blue dot so you can see where I tap my screen. I will tell you, it is very annoying using the software, but here are your brushes. This is your live brushes right here, which we're not going to get into. Here's your vector brushes, which we'll touch on briefly. This is your eraser tool. This is your shape tool right here. This is your move tool and your selection tool. This is lasso. Let me get rid of some of this. And you'll see I'm just undoing, and to undo, the gesture is tap the screen with 2 fingers. If you tap the screen with 2 fingers, it undoes what you did. If you tap the screen with 3 fingers, it will redo what you did. Okay, so here's the lasso tool, and that is either you can draw with a lasso around your selection, or you can use the square or circle tool. Here's your paint bucket tool. We'll use that a lot. Eyedropper. This is your file tool here. So if you hit that picture, it's going to bring up either files or photographs, and you can pull something off of your device. This is your color picker tool. And then this box right here is actually the characteristics of the tool that you're in. And we are going to talk about smoothing and size, but we're going to leave out this one and this one for today. Okay, so now over on the right hand side is going to be your layer panel. So here's the layer panel, and these are just some of the things that you can do when you create a layer. So you can add a layer, you can hide a layer, you can delete a layer, duplicate, copy, cut, create an empty mask. We're not going to review that today. We're not going to review cutting or copying. You can mask the layer contents, which is what we're going to use to rasterize. You can lock the layer, convert to pixel, and merge down. And depending on the kind of layer that you're in, there'll be some other options as well. Okay, so over here on your left, these are the brushes that we're going to be working in today. And basically, we're just going to work in two sets of brushes, the basic brushes and the comic brushes. And the comic brushes are where the halftones and screen tones are. And then later on, you can download all the Adobe brushes, which there are quite a few. So let's go ahead and get started with our design. So I just hit up here and look for the blue dot to see what my stylus is doing, or my Apple Pencil. I just hit the home button. So now I'm at the home screen. Whoops. And I'm just going to choose current screen size. Now, if you're going to actually print this, I would choose either letter size or tabloid size. And you can go over here, create new, and it brings up several options for you to choose from. But because we're recording this, I don't want it to be huge, so I'm just going to use current screen size. Now, if you have a reference photo that you want to use, and in the interest of time, I'm actually going to use a reference, you'll just hit your photo picture down here, your photo icon, and I'm going to go to Photos, All Photos, and I'm just going to choose this design that I made for this video. So I'll hit done. That's what our design looks like, and I'm just going to use it as a reference. All right, so now that we have this design in our document, the first thing we want to do is make some colors. Now you can do this on your own, but since I've already done this, I thought I would show you really quickly how to get a color palette from a design. So I'm just going to tap on that black dot, and it's going to bring up our color wheel. Unfortunately, Fresco is in RGB, so you will need to convert it in Photoshop. But I'm just going to use my finger and touch on the colors in this image, and then just hit the plus button to add them to our color wheel. But, oh. And I'm just going to touch on one of the yellows. There we go. And add it to our color palette. So that was the yellow. Now let's do the pink. Hit that plus button. Let's do the blue. Hit the plus button. Let's do the green. And you can just move your finger around until you get the exact color you want. And let's hit the plus button. So now we have all the colors that we're going to need for this design. So now we're going to go over to our shape tool, press and hold. And we're going to use one of these basic shapes, but I just wanted to quickly show you something cool. These are my capture shapes. And Capture is another app that Adobe has, and I have taken some photographs from Unsplash or something I found on the internet, or photographs I've taken myself, and it turns it into a vector. And so if you see here, you probably can't see it. Let me make this black. I've got like a very faint Bronco on my screen. I'm going to hit the plus button, and I'm just going to choose Fill, make it a pixel layer, and you can see it has given me a Ford Bronco, and I didn't really have to do anything, which is pretty neat. So we're going to undo that because that's a little advanced for this, but we're going to go back over to our shape panel, and we're going to go with basic shapes, and we're just going to use a square. So this square is way too big. So now I'm using gestures. So I can use my two fingers and I can just pinch or push outward. So pinch, push outward. So I've pinched that in, and I can also touch the handles with my Apple Pencil or your stylus, and I can just drag in or out. Okay, so that looks good. And you want to make sure you're on a new layer over here. We want to be on this layer. And then I'm going to go over to my color palette and I'm going to choose pink, one of the pinks that we picked. And I'm just going to hit fill. And here we're going to use a pixel layer. Okay, now I'm going to pull that in a little bit. I'm going to go back on my image below and I'm going to create the other square for the surf shop background. So I'm just going to drag this handle to the right until it hits 45, and notice it snapped in place for us. And I'm just going to drag these handles out and maybe resize it a little bit. Okay, and we're going to fill that with green. Again, pixel layer. And now we have got the beginnings of our design. Now, if we turn off our reference layer, I like to use a background layer. Now, there's 3 different types of layers in Adobe Fresco. So when you see this photograph, that means it is a photo layer and it's kind of locked down unless you convert it to a pixel layer. But I like to keep that background layer because if I bring it into Photoshop, I just have a nice background layer. So I'm going to go to this layer above it and I'm just going to fill that with black by using the paint bucket tool. And I just touch anywhere in that and it's going to fill it. I'm going to choose pixel. It's going to fill it with black. And so I'm going to bring this. Now I'm going to drag our reference layer up to the top. And I accidentally grouped it, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to tap with 2 fingers to undo that. And there we go. And I'm going to look at that again, and I'm just going to tap up here on the right and bring that opacity down. Okay. And now let's draw some surfboards. So I'm going to use 2 fingers and I'm just going to turn, because I draw better like, actually I'm going to turn the other way. I draw better like that. So now let's take a look at the brushes. So if we use a regular brush, let me turn that black layer off for a minute. And let me turn off our reference layer. So if we go in here to our basic panel, you're going to see we've got hard round, soft round, variable opacity, all of that stuff. We're going to use the hard round. And this is going to be your default settings here. So let me just show you what happens when you use, make sure you're on a new layer, when you use these default settings. So you see how crooked my line is, and if you've never drawn on the iPad before, your line's probably going to be even more crooked than that. I'm just kind of used to it. So you don't want that, obviously. So what you're going to do is you're going to touch on this S down here, and you're just going to bring your smoothing up. Now, I use like maybe a 90. I know that sounds crazy. You might want to do 100. The only problem with having it 100% smooth is it's hard to get a crisp corner. So look at the difference in the line if I'm using it smooth. So we're going to use a smooth line. So that's how you make it smooth. You just move that up and down. And like I said, I'm going to go with maybe 90. Okay, so that's a pixel brush. Now, what if you used let me just draw a pixel brush on here for you. And if you make this really big by zooming out, you can see that this is pixelated. It's not 100% smooth. And so let me show you what happens with a vector brush. So if you come over here to this brush tab and you choose a basic round, and you can also smooth as well. So look, when we zoom out or zoom in, it's just 100%, the line is just 100% smooth. And you can see actually by having a 100 smooth brush, you really can't get a good angle. Okay, so that is vector brushes, and you just can't do quite as much, and it's a little bit slower, so we're not going to use vector brushes today. So I'm going to 2-finger tap and undo all that, and go back to our smooth brush, turn our reference layer on, and we're going to trace these surfboards. And I cannot recommend tracing enough. It's just going to get you used to drawing on the iPad. So we want to make sure we're on a new layer. And if you want, you can lock this layer so you can't draw on it. So I have locked it so you won't be able to draw on that. And I'm just going to come over here and we're going to draw one surfboard. And let me just make that brush a little bit smaller. So I'm just tapping here. You can make it huge or you can make it smaller. Maybe at 18. Now I'm just going to 2-finger tap to undo. And this is not going to be perfect because in the interest of time, I'm going to try and do it kind of quickly. And you may have to do this several times until you get what you want. Okay, so that, no, I'm sorry. Do that again. Okay. Okay, so now we have the beginning of our surfboard. Let's go ahead and change our brush tip. And this time we're going to go with hard round variable. And what that means is we want to smooth that one as well. So it's on smooth. So if you press hard, it changes size, and the lighter pressure you give, the smaller the line is. So we're going to use that. Now, one thing I also want to mention is you want to turn on your snap line. And so, for example, here's me drawing a straight line. And that's, not very straight. So if you come over into your settings, which is this gear up here on the top right, you're going to go to, you're going to go to app settings and input, touch, and you want to make sure that this snap line is turned off for some reason by default. So you're going to want to turn that on. And here's why. When you draw a straight line, if you hold, it will make it straight. And that's what's really cool. For example, here's my snap line, but I can also move it around, change the size, as long as I don't lift my stylus up. Okay, so we want to use that snap line to make sure these lines right here that we're going to draw on the surfboard are straight. So I'm just going to, all right, that's I went a little too far up. Okay, let me just color that little section in right there. And if you wanted a little dot there, you could do that. All right, let's do the bottom one. And again, I'm just going to hold, and it's going to snap it into place. That's probably a little ridiculous. All right, and again, in the interest of time, we're going to leave it at that. Okay, I'm going to go back to my hard round brush and just add a little detail here. And I'm going to add a little, add a little detail over here. Well, I tell you what, I am not drawing well today. Again, in the interest of time, that's going to be good enough. Okay, so we finished that surfboard. Now let's go ahead and color it in. So we're going to go back over here to our color wheel, and we're going to choose yellow. And we're going to hit our paint bucket. Now, if you have, for example, let me go back up here. Let me go to black. Okay, so let's say I have a shape, and I don't quite touch. Now you're going to have them closer, but I just want you to get an idea. So let's say we have that shape, and we go over here and we're like, okay, let me fill that with yellow, hit our paint bucket, and I touch that and notice it filled the whole page. So what you want to make sure of is you've got to have those lines have to touch. There has to be a closed end shape. So that's why it's so important for the surfboard to be to be closed in. Now, you've got fill settings over here where you can change the amount of fill in case your detail is a little too much, but I like to stay around 150. You are going to have to see what works best for you. All right, so I am just filling in our surfboard, and now we have a completed surfboard just by using that paint bucket. So what we want to do is go ahead and duplicate that layer. So I'm just going to tap on it, and it's going to bring up my layer actions, and I'm going to choose duplicate layer. Then I'm going to go over to the left where my tool panel is, and I'm going to hit this selection tool, and I'm going to flip that surfboard up here. Notice up here on the top right, I'm just going to flip it, and now we have both surfboards. So we're done, and I'm going to just go ahead and merge that one down so it's just one layer. Okay, so we're done there. I'm going to turn that off for the time being. And let's go to I'm going to turn this one off too. We can leave this one on if we wanted to. But over here, we're going to add this wave. So I'm going to go back over to my color tool, choose black, get our basic brush, okay? And notice that I have a star there. That makes it a favorite. And so any brush that you star is in your favorites panel. And believe me, just to give you an idea, these are all the brush sets that I have. So it's a lot of brushes. So if you go over to favorites and you just have a few, it's easy to find your brush. So we're going to use hard round. And we're just going to kind of make these waves here. Okay. Let me turn off. Okay, again, for the interest of time, we're going to just go with that. You could move that if you wanted to, just slightly turn it a little bit to make it perfect. Actually, that's probably pretty good. I'm going to hit done there. And now I'm going to merge this down because I want to color the bottom section of this design blue. So now that's on one layer, and I'm going to use the eraser tool just so you guys can see if I had made a mistake. In fact, let me go back. Okay, so notice that I could do that, two-finger tap. But if I wanted to clean that up, I could with the eraser tool. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the eraser tool, but I do use it a lot. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's merge that back down. Go to our colors, choose the blue. It's not very blue. Make it a little bluer. And go to our paint bucket, and bam. So now we have blue. So let's see where we are with our whole design now. Okay, so we have our surfboards and our design. Let's turn the black back on. And so now all we need to do is rasterize it. And to do that, we're going to create a layer mask, and we are actually going to go from the bottom layer up. So I'm going to turn the surfboards off. I'm going to leave this on for a minute because When you're rasterizing or creating negative space for t-shirt printing, you wanted to go through every single layer. So you don't want to see the layer below it. You want to make sure that your holes go all the way through to the shirt. So we want to make sure we cut this square out of this when we're rasterizing it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tap on it, and we are going to choose Mask Layer Contents. We're going to choose Hide. And the easiest way to make a perfect shape is to go over to our lasso tool and choose the rectangle. And so I'm just going to tap on the corner of this and come down like that, and making sure that you're on this layer over here that's red, which is the layer mask, and you're just going to hit Erase, then deselect. And now if you bring it to, you just swipe right and left once you add a mask. So on your layer, you just swipe right or left. Now let's turn that off. And now you can see that there is no, nothing back there. So if I turn that background off again, so we now have a hole there, which is what we want. Okay, so now we want to rasterize the rest of this. So before we do that, let's take a look at some of these brushes that are available. And again, today we're just going to use the brushes that come in the basic up here. So we're going to go with Comics. And I have a couple that I really like. I like this Halftone 5. Let me just make this black. Let's turn our eyedropper tool off. Okay, so I am going to just create a new layer just so you guys can see. And so these are all of our comic brushes. So we've got Crosshatch, which we're going to use for one of those squares. We've got Halftone. So notice that the harder I press, the darker it gets. We have several other ones. Here's Halftone Big, so it's going to give you big holes. And again, it depends on how hard you press as to how big your holes are, which is kind of cool. And you can, go through here and check them yourself. Like here's a, kind of a bubbles effect. But we're going to use Halftone 5 for this. So we're going to go back over to our mask. Again, I just swiped left, and we're going to just, oops. It might be good for me to turn that mask back, turn that layer back on. Okay, so now we're just going to, whoops, want to make sure you're choosing Hide. Apparently I didn't turn my notifications off, so excuse all those coming up. And so the harder you press, the more dense your mask is going to be. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. Now notice if I press really hard, you see what happens? So I don't want it quite that hard, but you get the idea. Okay, so now you can see if we turn our black back on, that's what our background looks like, which again, I think is pretty neat. So this time we want to rasterize our pink square. So we're going to just tap on that and mask the layer contents. And we're going to choose this crosshatch. And whoops, I do this every time. You want to make sure down here on the bottom that you choose Hide. So Reveal is going to reveal the design. Hide is going to take away. So we want to make sure we choose Hide. And we're just going to kind of go back and forth with that crosshatch. And notice that it is a little grainy. And so you may have some clogged holes. So you might want to increase, oops. So you might want to increase your pressure. You see what I mean? And it's also changing the size with how much pressure I use, which I thought was kind of cool. Okay, so that is our crosshatch mask. So now we want to do our our surfboards. Now, in order to do that and make sure it goes all the way through, we're going to actually have to merge this layer down. So I'm going to just merge it down, which has rasterized that layer. So notice I can no longer do anything with that mask. By merging that together, now it's one layer, no mask. And if I turn off the eyedropper tool, let me turn off this background. You can see that you can see the checkerboard background back there. Let me turn on that back again. Okay, so we're going to mask that. Just the surfboard. Choose hide. And this time we're going to go back over to halftone 5 and we're going to just make it really light. So we don't need it to be 382. I'm going to just reduce the size of the brush. I'm just going to lightly, don't use a lot of pressure here because I don't want to go into the crosshatch. So we're just going to lightly rasterize that surfboard, taking care not to get into the cross tones. Okay. All right, so we are done with the rasterization. So now all we have to do is add a little text. I'm going to do that pretty quickly. The unfortunate part about Adobe Fresco versus the iPad Procreate app is there is no text tool. So at this point, you could take this into Photoshop if you wanted and add your text, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to handwrite some text here, and I am going to cheat just because, again, of time, and I'm going to turn that reference layer back on, and I'm going to increase the opacity a little bit just so I can see what I did before. I'm going to go over and choose white, turn my screen a little bit, and I'm just going to write in white. Oh, and I don't want, what I want to make sure of is I have my basic hard round brush, and we'll just trace this. And again, I highly recommend that you trace as much as you can because it's going to just help you get comfortable with your lines. And I will find a design or something like that on Pinterest and just do a screenshot and just carry it in. So for example, if you want to copy what I've done here, you can just make a screenshot of the opening of the video, and that will give you a nice background to start with, and you can just trace and use it as a reference. And now notice I'm using that snap line to make my line straight. Okay, so I think that's going to do it for this design. Let's turn that off. Now let's say if I'm quickly going to, I notice that my P is a little bit off, so I'm just going to see if I can't make that a little bit longer. Okay, so now we just have to export it. Again, I would just hit your home screen and save it. If you want to call it something, you just hit the gear and you change the name, White Toner Transfer Support Group. Okay. Okay. And then you can either export it as a snapshot, which is going to just be a PNG file, but probably not the best. And if you do that, you want to make sure you turn off your background layer so you just have the transparent part. Or you can just hit your home button, and then when you go into Photoshop, you're going to use Cloud Documents, and you're going to pull up your document. Change it into CMYK color profile in Photoshop, and then you can import it into your RIP software. So I hope this was helpful. I have been having a blast with Adobe Fresco. I hope you do too, and I can't wait to see what you guys create.